Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Random Ramblings podcast. I'm your host Ronan, and if you've ever struggled with taking criticism personally or found yourself replaying one piece of feedback for days, I feel like this episode is going to feel familiar. And today's episode is called This One Shift Changed How I Handle Criticism. And it's not clickbait. There really was a moment on a very real hospital shift when I got called out, publicly, in a way that left me feeling small, angry, embarrassed, and honestly heartbroken. And I kept thinking, they don't know what I was dealing with. And yet that moment also gave me a completely different way of seeing criticism, one that doesn't shatter my self-worth anymore. So let me take you back to that day. It was a day shift, a packed, understaffed, overworked kind of day. Phones were ringing, call lights were flashing, med orders were changing every 15 minutes, and that kind of chaos. I was working as a nurse technician on a post-surgical unit at the time. I was still a pre-med student, so still learning a lot about everything that goes on in the hospital and all of that. And I had I think it was about 8 to 12 patients assigned to me that morning, and they were all high acuity. Vitals every few hours, constant rounding, assisting patients with mobility, wound care, you name it. One of my patients, for HIPAA reasons, I'll just call him Mr. Thompson, just for a random name, had a Foley catheter in place, and the urine drainage container was about half full. I noted it during one of my early rounds and told myself, okay, after I finish in room 12, I'll circle back and empty that. Right after I stepped out of room 12, a code blue was just called down the hallway. Now, for those that aren't involved in the medical field, a code blue is something that if a patient is, let's say, suffering from a heart attack or, essentially, I don't want to keep it blunt, but, they're about to die, like maybe if that, again, having a heart attack or something like that, you would, if you notice, certain symptoms, you would initiate a code blue, and this would get all the doctors in the facility, nurses, nurse techs, everyone would respond to this, and there's like a certain procedure that gets put in place to basically try and save this patient's life and stop their body from crashing. And without thinking, I ran towards this code blue. A patient was crashing, and even though I wasn't the lead responder, I helped in every way I could. Maybe resonates with all the pre-meds out there, but if a code blue happens, it's quite exhilarating responding to this, especially if you're not used to it. So I paged a respiratory team, I helped grab the crash cart, I took over compressions at one point and charted the vitals on the board. It was very intense, overwhelming, but honestly, again, as a pre-med student, you find this quite exhilarating. But I imagine it is quite traumatic. Your heart's pounding, everyone's yelling orders, time rarely bends. You're in this room for close to an hour, and time really does bend when I say that hour goes by pretty quickly. All that mattered in that moment was keeping someone alive. Eventually the code was resolved, the patient stabilized and was moved to the ICU, and I finally returned to my floor to catch up on my tasks. Now, as soon as I walked back towards my side of the unit, one of the nurses that, as a nurse technician, you work under or work with nurses on the floor and kind of assist in what they're doing. And as one of the nurses came up to me, and someone I had worked with quite often before, and quickly said, why is Mr. Thompson's catheter bag still full? You walked past it over an hour ago. That's basic patient care. Right there in the hallway, loud enough for every patient, every doctor, every nurse, every medical worker to hear, and I froze. I felt like I had just been hit across the chest. And I tried to explain. I was in, the code in room 15. I meant to circle back after, but she cut me off. And she said, it doesn't matter, that should have been done. Then she walked away, and the rest of the hallway got real quiet. So super duper duper awkward. But that moment really wrecked me. I kept asking myself the whole rest of that shift, did I really mess up that badly? Does she think I'm lazy? Now, does everyone think I'm lazy? Again, you're a pre-med student, so you're really trying to, you want to try and get into medical school, so you're really trying to put your best foot forward. So, you start thinking to yourself, am I not cut out for this? And, and worst of all, if I had stayed and emptied the bag instead of responding to the code, I kept thinking to myself, would that patient have made it? It was a no-win situation, and the shame really started to spiral. Because here's the thing, I really do care, and deeply. I've always taken pride in doing my job well. I show up early, I stay late, I ask questions, I pay attention, and I try. And still, I got called out for missing something. Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the tone in her voice, her words, the way she walked away, and that phrase just kept repeating in my mind. That's basic patient care. It kept echoing, like I was being accused of not doing the bare minimum. But then, somewhere in the middle of that loop, I had a moment of clarity. But what if this isn't about me? What if this isn't judgment of my character, but a comment on my process? What if she wasn't trying to insult me, but was reacting to what she saw patients as a patient safety concern? So that night I made a decision, a simple one, but it changed everything. From now on, I will separate feedback from identity. And here's the shift in plain language. This was the old way of me thinking. She criticized me, so I must be a bad tech. I'm not cut out for this. But I feel like a better shift, and I think my new way of thinking is, she pointed out something that needs attention. Can I improve that without destroying myself in the process? This change didn't make criticism feel good, but it made it feel useful. So now when someone gives me feedback, even if it's blunt, harsh, or badly timed, I ask myself, is it about what I did or who I am? Was their delivery poor, but the point valid? And again, I'll relate it back to that topic. As a tech, you don't have a license, a medical license. As a nurse, they've got a lot to lose. If they mess up on what she was considering the bare minimum, she could lose her license and lose her job, and that also shows she takes a lot of pride in what she does. So yes, do I think she could have delivered that better? Pulled me to the side and said, could you do that, or why wasn't it done, or asked me why in private that not everyone could hear. But when I asked myself, was that point valid? It was. At the end of the day, it really was. Can I thank them silently for the reminder and use it to level up? Which I did. I took it, and going forward, I made sure that I got those things kind of done in the moment, and did a better system of making sure I got everything done. But most importantly, can I hold space for my growth without tying my worth to perfection? Because perfection doesn't exist, but growth, that's always possible. So if you're someone who takes criticism hard, I do see you. I really think it means you care. It means you want to do better. It means you hold yourself to a high standard. Maybe too high sometimes, but it's always good to hold yourself to that. You're not the mistake. You're not the missed catheter. You're not the one moment caught you slipping. But you're someone who learns, someone who adjusts, someone who shows up again and again, wiser, stronger, and more grounded. So I feel like here's a challenge I'd like to put out for all of you. And next time you're criticized, even unfairly, pause. Don't rush to defend yourself. Don't crumble into shame. Don't take it too hard. But just ask yourself, what's the growth here? What can I take out of the point that they're trying to put across? And that growth, take that growth with you, quietly and proudly. You don't have to be loud about your comeback, but just be consistent. But I would like to also bring up another point, and that is, I'll relate it. I guess it'll be easier if I relate it back to that other story. Since I became better and I took that advice to heart, and I made sure I was doing that patient care better in the future, especially working with that nurse. And that actually made me a better nurse technician. I feel like I found new ways just to be better and be more present with the patients, and not to give too much or too little time to each patient. And so she really did help me, and we became good friends after that. There was no more issues. But again, if that had to continue, you fixed what you took it to heart, you listened to them, you fixed what they wanted, and they were still continuing, again and again and shouting at you, then I do think that is an issue and something you should take up the leadership chain to be sorted out. But I do think if you do those steps that I have highlighted, I think I've shifted my new way of thinking. I think majority of the time it won't get to that. But, thanks for listening to the Random Ramblings podcast. And if this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really honored if you shared it with someone, who else needs to hear it. And if you've got a similar story, please send me a DM and follow us on Instagram at the Random Ramblings podcast. I'd love to hear how you're navigating this hard stuff too. And until next time, stay honest, stay growing, and, just keep going.